Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine for a second that you're just walking down the street. You're holding a cup of coffee, maybe thinking about your schedule for the day, and suddenly, without any warning whatsoever, the Earth just simply lets go of you. You aren't flying. It's more like you're falling upward, drifting away into the sky, completely untethered from everything you've ever known. Welcome to our explainer on the Bureau of Weightless Things. Today we're exploring an absolutely incredible, honestly terrifying case study where gravity is just no longer a given. It's a reality that completely challenges our most basic assumptions about safety, and it forces us to ask, what happens when the fundamental laws of physics break down and human beings have to somehow bureaucratize the impossible just to survive?
I want you to really plunge yourself into this eerie reality. We aren't talking about some superhero origin story here or, a futuristic anti-gravity tech. We are looking at a world where totally normal, everyday people, maybe someone watering their tomatoes, a kid swinging at a park, an old man just sitting in his living room watching TV, are suddenly pulled upward. They don't choose to float, it just happens. And if they happen to be outside when the universe decides to stop holding on to them, well, they literally drift into the atmosphere, and that often has fatal consequences. The things we take for granted, like the very act of just standing on the pavement, suddenly become this terrifying game of cosmic roulette.
Now, the government, in classic government fashion, has given this terrifying magic realism a profoundly dry clinical name. They call it spontaneous vertical displacement. To manage this relentless existential crisis, the city set up the Department of Levitation Control, or the DLC for short. They're tasked with rescuing these floaters and tracking the phenomenon across the city limits. But honestly, applying grim municipal bureaucracy to a fundamental breakdown of the universe's rules, it's kind of like trying to stop a massive hurricane by filing paperwork in triplicate. It's a tragic comedy of human coping mechanisms. You've got city officials basically attempting to zone and legislate an act of miracle, or a horror, depending on how you look at it.
To really wrap our heads around the Department of Levitation Control, we have to look at the daily reality of Officer Mira Santorini. She drinks cold coffee under these flickering fluorescent lights, and she only writes with a 12-ounce solid brass pen. Why? Well, because her standard-issue plastic pens just kept unexpectedly floating away mid-sentence. At home, it gets even crazier. She actually superglues her ceramic bowls directly to her dining table. I mean, it's a profound testament to how human beings adapt to impossible, relentless chaos. We normalize the abnormal. We don't just panic forever. Eventually, we just add heavy lead weights to our trunks, glue down our cereal bowls, and keep going about our day as if gravity being optional is completely normal.
Section 1. The Grandview Cluster.
So, this brings us to the core of our investigation. This is the inciting incident that completely shattered the department's fragile understanding of the entire phenomenon. Up until this point, spontaneous levitation was totally isolated and random. You'd have one person float over here, another person across the city a few weeks later. But then, inside the mid-century Grandview Apartments, 5 entirely unrelated residents suddenly float to their ceilings within a single, frantic 90-minute window. They're on completely different floors. They have absolutely no prior history of buoyancy. The stark impossibility of this cluster event forces Officer Santorini to realize a terrifying truth. Either these levitations are somehow contagious, or worse, they might be caused by the building itself.
During her investigation, Santorini actually interviews an elderly resident named Margaret Delgado. Margaret had floated right out from her reading chair and ended up pinned against her acoustic ceiling tiles for hours. Her account really highlights the profound, haunting emotional reality of this phenomenon. She said it didn't hurt at all. It felt like being unmade. It's not physically painful, but it is this massive existential violation. You lose your physical tether to the earth, the very force that gives you weight and presence. You're basically reduced to a helpless balloon pressed against the plaster, just waiting around for the planet to decide if it wants you back.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how seemingly mundane architectural details become these absolutely critical forensic clues. Santorini and her partner, Officer DiMarco, systematically uncover a bizarre pattern that points away from a biological contagion and straight toward a structural one. Get this, the Grandview was built in 1962. Before every single lift event, residents reported that the lights flickered in a highly specific rhythm. There was also this persistent, high-pitched hum coming from the elevator shafts. And most importantly, just 8 months prior, the building had undergone a massive, over-budget electrical upgrade to try and meet the intense power demands of its modern tenants.
Section 2. Architecture and Anomalies.
Enter Dr. Reeves. He's this brilliant but totally frayed physicist from the National Levitation Studies Institute, and he begins a frantic search for a physical cause hidden within the Grandview's infrastructure. He hooks up these highly sensitive environmental sensors all over the building, and bam, he makes a massive breakthrough. He discovers the entire Grandview apartment structure is vibrating at precisely 7.83 hertz. This is the Schumann resonance. It's the fundamental electromagnetic resonance of the Earth's ionosphere. Basically, it's the planet's natural invisible heartbeat, a frequency created by global lightning strikes that constantly rings around the Earth. It's completely natural, sure, but a 12-story residential concrete building shouldn't be amplifying this frequency.
Dr. Reeves theorizes that when you pump massive modern electrical loads through the rigid mid-century architecture of the Grandview, it creates a fatal harmonic resonance. And it is a terrifying realization. The entire apartment building essentially becomes a giant concrete tuning fork. It's humming and vibrating at a frequency so specific and so intense that it actively interacts with and temporarily cancels out local gravitational fields. The building isn't just a place to live anymore. It has inadvertently transformed into a localized gravity nullification machine.
So what we have here is a literal, fatal friction between the past and the present. You have the mid-century concrete bones of a 1960s building, right? It was designed for a time when people had maybe a toaster and a single television. Now it is completely unable to gracefully handle the massive, constant power demands of our modern, hyper-connected electrical grid, the servers, the charging stations, all the smart appliances. Under this immense strain, the building doesn't burn down, it doesn't blow a fuse. Instead, the conflicting forces create an electromagnetic anomaly that simply turns off gravity for the people trapped inside. It is such a profound commentary on how our aging infrastructure might break down in ways we could never possibly predict.
Section 3. The mathematics of weightlessness.
Let's move to and see how this builds. As Dr. Reeves monitors this harmonic resonance, he realizes the building's vibrations are spiraling completely out of control. The math here is terrifying, and it's exponential, acting as a very real ticking clock for our investigators. Think about it. The first event saw 5 people float. A short time later, the building's resonance spiked again, sending 13 people to their ceilings in an absolute panic. The building was literally learning to vibrate more efficiently. It was harmonizing with itself, gearing up for a massive, catastrophic climax. 53. Just pause and imagine the sheer horror and scale of that number for a second. During the third harmonic spike, 53 residents of the Grandview Apartments are simultaneously pinned against their ceilings in a single night. We're talking children in their bedrooms, elderly couples trying to sleep, people in the middle of taking a shower, people working late on conference calls. The entire building basically inhaled, completely rewrote the laws of physics in a massive geographic footprint, and violently took half its occupants into the air.
But the horror absolutely does not stop when they finally float back down to the floor hours later. The DLC discovers a shocking medical anomaly among the victims. Subsequent testing reveals that residents who floated now have a slightly lower baseline gravitational constant. Yeah, you heard that right. The Grandview building isn't just turning gravity off temporarily, it is literally altering the residents' atomic relationship with gravity itself. It is making them permanently lighter. This means the danger doesn't end when they step outside the building. Their fundamental interaction with reality has been compromised, leaving them forever vulnerable to just drifting away on a breezy day.
Section 4. Bureaucracy and Gravity.
And this leads us into a deeply frustrating clash. You have groundbreaking scientific discovery pitted directly against the crushing reality of municipal bureaucracy. The city's emergency management department wants an immediate mandatory evacuation of the building. But Officer Santorini and Dr. Reeves face this agonizing dilemma. If you keep residents inside the Grandview, sure, they get contained against a ceiling when gravity fails. They are terrified, but they are safe. But if you force them to evacuate outside into an uncontrolled environment, and the anomaly hits their compromised bodies out on the street, they will fatally drift into the open sky. Inside is terrifying for sure, but outside is deadly. So, what does the city do? Well, they choose liability over answers. The city outright orders a mandatory evacuation, forces all 140 residents out onto the dangerous streets and into temporary municipal shelters, and instantly condemns the building. Just as Dr. Reeves was breaking the code, just as he was gathering the precise data needed to understand and potentially cure this global phenomenon, the city permanently halts the research. They board up the doors, they cut the power, all just to avoid a massive lawsuit. The answers are quite literally buried beneath red tape. As the residents are being forced out with their hastily packed bags, one of them, a woman named Jasmine Okoye, delivers this profound realization. She says, "It's the universe showing us that all our rules are provisional." It's a statement of profound cosmic humility. Humans spend their entire lives vainly trying to impose bureaucratic order on everything, right? Printing out forms, issuing evacuation notices, trying to zone away danger, all while entirely ignoring the chaotic reality that the very ground beneath our feet is a privilege. It is not a guarantee.
Which leaves us with this final haunting question. When the universe stops holding on, do we try to furiously enforce control, or do we learn to let go? The residents of the Grandview learned the hard way that their attachments to safety, to the reliability of physics, to the Earth itself, were incredibly fragile. It really forces us to ask what we are tethered to in our own lives, and what we would do if, tomorrow morning, those tethers simply snapped. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Until next time, try to keep your feet on the ground.